You are listening to the Monday Night War Review, where frankincense, big business, and big techs chronologically review the Monday Night Wars from 1995 to 2001 between WCW Nitro and WWF Monday Night Raw. Join us for this roller coaster ride of nostalgia and hilarity.
It's my life in the box in front of me. Taking talk in my arms is the soul of me. You walk by, ask to see me laying face down.
All right, welcome to the Monday Night War Review. We are back to do the September 25th, 1995 episodes of Monday Night Raw and WCW Monday Nitro. We had Undertaker and British Bulldog on Raw as the main event, and we had Lex Luger and Meng as the main event of Nitro. But first, I want to talk about a couple things from the present in 2020. So last time we recorded an episode, I found out that Big Business had gone to the first XFL game of the year in 2020. And so I wanted to pick his brain about how his XFL experience was. I don't even know the DC team's name. I don't know who they were playing. I don't know anything about the rules. You know, tell me about it, Business, and do you think you would go again?
I will say it was the DC Defenders. I don't remember who they were playing. I think it was Seattle. It was fun. I enjoyed myself. I think the game was sold out, actually. Although not all the seats were filled. But it was a pretty rowdy crowd. People seemed into it. As far as the actual game itself went, it was entertaining. I think the first go-round of XFL had a lot more gimmicky things in it. The stuff they do is still kind of like funny that I enjoy. Like if the kicker missed the field goal, he'd walk off the field, and they'd immediately go up to him to talk to him. And I get a kick out of that. Like that's kind of humiliating, but it was a good time. I will say, I don't know who was running the venue, but there were a lot of problems getting like food and beverages, which I think probably annoyed a lot of people. But the actual game itself, I think people enjoyed. So
Tex, you watched the game on TV, right? What did you think?
Yeah, I watched most of the first half, and DC had actually a Cleveland product playing quarterback. He actually led Ohio State to the national championship. I think it was in 14 or 15. His name's Cardell Jones, so I think he's still starting for DC. But yeah, the football wasn't bad. I mean, you saw a few drop passes here and there. They had an interesting format for their kickoffs, which I really liked.
Do you think you'd watch it again?
I'll check a few out. I mean, you know, if I don't have anything else I'm going to watch. But I mean, we do have baseball season right around the corner, so we'll see.
True. Some people don't know this about Tex, but he is sort of our resident expert on other combat sports. I mean, I don't really know how much Tex gets into the UFC and stuff, but I do know he's a big boxing fan. And last night we had a fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, and I guess it was their second fight. I'm bringing this up mostly because Tyson Fury has been involved with the WWE and stuff, but I wanted to see what Tex thought about that fight.
Yeah, so the much-anticipated rematch between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, I thought Fury actually won the first fight. It was ruled a draw. I thought he won pretty much every round up until the couple rounds where he got knocked down, and there's no mathematical way that Wilder could have won that fight on points, but it's boxing, and there's always questionable decisions from the judges. But yeah, Tyson Fury, huge heavyweight. I mean, we're in the era of huge heavyweights right now. He's 6'9". He fought last night at 273. I mean, that's ridiculously big. I think he had like a 50-pound weight advantage for the fight, which he needed because he got dropped a couple times in the first one. He's from Great Britain, huge personality, dealt with a lot of personal issues and demons, had drug problems. He had gotten up to like 400 pounds at one point. So he's lost a ton of weight. He's gotten his life back on track and his career. He's the undefeated, still the lineal heavyweight champion. Simply put, he's the man who, beat the man who beat the man who beat the man who beat the man who beat the man. When there's so many different governing bodies in boxing, you're going to have like 4 different heavyweight belts and, multiple belts for different weight classes. So it's a decent way of kind of following the lineage of the heavyweight title through history.
So he showed up and he fought Braun Strowman at one of the Saudi Arabia shows for the WWE. He hit Strowman with a punch and knocked him out. And I mean, I think if he's undefeated in boxing, the WWE is not going to have him lose a match in WWE. I actually saw this news posting that Braun Strowman wants to have another match with him after this big win he just had over Wilder. So I'm wondering, and there is a Saudi show coming up here pretty soon called Super Showdown. So I'm wondering if we're going to get another Tyson Fury WWE match. He is humongous. And I agree that he has a larger-than-life personality. He was cutting pretty good promos for his WWE match, and I heard that after the fight last night, he was, singing in the ring.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he was.
Yeah, see, I think he's got a future with doing more WWE stuff. I just feel like he would fit right in if he wants to, So, back to 1995. WWF Monday Night Raw is coming off of an In Your House pay-per-view. I watched it in its entirety. Pretty sure Tex watched it. Business did not watch it, so I thought it'd be fun to kind of recap the matches and see if Business could predict who won the different bouts we had on the card. So the first match from In Your House 3 was Savio Vega versus Waylon Mercy. So Business, what's your prediction for that intriguing bout?
I'm going to go with Savio Vega.
Well, you called it right, man. So 1 for 1. Business is 1 for 1. Why bring in Waylon Mercy and give him this creepy Southern con gimmick and then just have him job out to Savio? I did not understand it at all. I guess they just saw more upside with Savio.
Well, you know what? Because I didn't watch the In Your House, I still really don't think I know what Waylon Mercy looks like. Because I think they showed him from behind briefly on Raw.
Yeah, inexplicably. They showed him.
And I can't remember what he was doing. It was weird.
He was just watching. Yeah, it was it made no sense. From what I've gathered, there was this movie with Robert De Niro called Cape Fear. He plays this guy who's this creepy Southerner who's weird yet seductive, or he's kind of like a con man. He wears a Hawaiian shirt, and I'm pretty sure Waylon Mercy is basically just supposed to be a rip off of that character from Cape Fear. Business, who do you think won between Psycho Sid and Henry O. Godwin?
Psycho Sid, please.
Please. Well, you are 2 for 2, my friend. That is correct. Probably the best part of this match was when Henry Godwin, he dumped the entire slop bucket over Ted DiBiase's head. He literally put the bucket on his head. It looked like it looked like such a nasty thing for DiBiase to endure. And then we had British Bulldog versus Bam Bam Bigelow. Who do you think won that one?
I am going to go with British Bulldog.
Well, you are 3 for 3, my friend. So that's pretty good so far. Yeah, I mean, Bam Bam was face at this point, and I think Bam Bam as a face just wasn't really going anywhere. We had Dean Douglas with Bob Backlund in his corner versus Razor Ramon. So what do you think about that one?
Didn't Razor win?
Actually, that's incorrect. Dean Douglas won. The 1-2-3 Kid came out and had a really strange...
that's right.
It was a really strange interference where the Kid counted the 3 count when the referee was down, and I guess that was supposed to be Razor thought he won because he could only hear it, and he thought he was the ref counting 3, but then he stood up and it was the Kid all along who had done the 3 count. And then they kind of just had this weird back and forth where it was very unclear why Razor would be so pissed off about that, and why the Kid did it in the first place, and but they kind of scrapped, and then Razor kind of looked like the dick because he's the one who pushed the Kid out of the ring. And then Dean Douglas rolled Razor up and hooked the trunks and won the match. And so Dean Douglas is going to get to face Shawn Michaels for the IC championship.
I'll tell you why I thought Razor had won. I had been watching a future match a couple years in the future between a Nitro performer known as Disco Inferno and one of Razor's future gimmicks. And Razor won that one. So
Okay, nice. Yeah, you saw a little Scott Hall action. So then who do you think won between Bret Hart and Jean-Pierre Lafitte?
Jean-Pierre?
Oh, that would have been big for him. No, so Bret Hart won the match.
Good.
I thought it was probably the best part of In Your House 3 was that match. You might know this based on what happened on Raw, but then we had two dudes with attitudes, which I didn't even know was their official tag team name, but we had two dudes with attitudes, Shawn and Diesel, versus Yokozuna and not Owen Hart. It was the British Bulldog who took his place. So who do you think won between Diesel and Shawn and Bulldog and Yoko?
I understand that Diesel and Shawn won, but that there were a lot of legal questions surrounding the transfer of the title.
Yeah, I have some strong feelings about the main event and how it played out, but before I get into that, Tex, you watched this show. You know, what are your thoughts overall about In Your House 3 and the card that we got to see?
Savio Vega Waylon Mercy match was forgettable. I thought the Bret and Jean-Pierre Lafitte match was excellent. I think it's really underrated. It's one of those kind of hidden gems. If you want to go back and look for like really good matches on random cards, I think that's one of them. Overall, I thought it was a pretty decent show for an In Your House. It wasn't sprawling. It wasn't even like 2 hours long. So also, Ted DiBiase getting slopped by Henry O. Godwin was excellent. That made me laugh like out loud.
The way the main event played out was kind of confusing to me. Like, throughout the whole show, they were kind of like, Owen Hart's not in the building. He's not here. Like, Cornette was trying to use that as an out to not have to, like, defend the titles. But then Monsoon said, like, the match had to go on and that Cornette had to pick somebody to take his place and all this stuff. And the whole time, I was like, oh, man, like, please be Vader. Like, please be Vader. I want Vader to be the mystery partner because we had just found out that Vader left WCW. And I was like, oh, that would be so dope if it was, like, Yoko and Vader versus Shawn and Diesel. And I was like, oh, please. But then it just ended up being the British Bulldog, who was a really predictable choice because he's already in Cornette's stable. And the Bulldog had already had a match earlier he already had a match with Bam Bam Bigelow earlier in the evening. And it just didn't really make a lot of sense because, like, they're talking about how Owen's not there and all this stuff. But then, in the match itself, Owen just shows up anyway, and, like, he comes out towards the end of the match and he tries to interfere. But then he just gets punked, and he just gets, like, punched in the stomach and then jackknife powerbombed and pinned, and so it looks like Diesel and Shawn are going to win. Well, it looks like, they did win the titles, but then they're taken away, as we find out, due to legal reasons and stuff. But the whole thing was just confusing, because it's like, if Owen was really there the whole time, like, my only guess is that they did this just so they could get, like, the Clarence Mason angle going, like, or they did it because they realized that they had backed themselves into a corner with their stipulation, and they didn't want HBK and Diesel to lose, but then they also didn't really want them to monopolize all the championship belts. They didn't want them to actually be the chaps with all the straps. They were saying that, like, Owen's wife was having a baby and stuff, but, like, I'm not really clear whether that was, like, the truth or just something they were saying in storyline, and, like, if that was the case, then all it did was cause him to show up late. It's not like he, like, actually missed it for his wife or, like, so I thought the whole thing was kind of like a bait and switch because, like, we didn't get our guaranteed title change that they promised. It's kind of a house show pay-per-view hybrid, and I felt like it ended up just feeling like a house show. And I just kind of thought In Your House 3 was, like, a little bit lackluster overall. Business, I gotta say, you did pretty well with your predictions. I feel like that might be a sign that the show was a little too predictable.
You know what? I'm not even sure why I said Jean-Pierre Lafitte, because I'm pretty sure I knew Bret Hart had won, because I think it might be briefly touched on in Raw.
The September 25th, 1995 episode of Raw was in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and from everything that I could tell, it was actually live this time, so that's really nice. I wrote down in my notes, like, it's about time, guys. It had a 1.9 in the TV ratings, and I noticed that the ratings actually were the exact reverse of last week, because we had a 1.9 for Raw and then a 2.7 for Nitro this week, and last week it was the exact opposite. Kind of interesting that Raw's ratings were so down, I guess even coming off of their pay-per-view. We have Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler on commentary as usual. We have this nice little kind of, I guess, segment or vignette where, Cornette has Clarence Mason and they're kind of in this like back room, and they're talking to Gorilla Monsoon about all this legal stuff, and it turns out that the pinfall didn't really count, but that Owen and Yoko were going to have to defend their titles against Shawn and Diesel at a later date, and that Yoko and Owen were going to have to defend their titles on Raw versus the Smoking Guns. Business, were you able to follow all this stuff since you didn't watch the pay-per-view?
I actually was able to get brought up to speed pretty quickly. And I don't know if it was the opening vignette that did it for me. I think it was the one after the Marty Jannetty match. But I did enjoy the whole Clarence Mason angle. Did either of you catch the name of the Clarence Mason law firm?
Yes, I did.
Ginsburg, Leibowitz, Lipschitz, and Mason.
Yeah, I thought that was an amazing line from Jerry Lawler. I thought that was so funny. Yeah, and I loved how McMahon during that same segment was like, "I'm actually not a big fan of attorneys myself," which I think was like a reference maybe to the steroid scandal that had happened like pretty recently or something. Like, well, yeah, Tex, how do you feel about Clarence Mason in general? What do you think about him?
I always remembered Clarence Mason from like the early days of the Nation of Domination. He was just kind of there, and he was just like, I don't even remember him doing too many promos. He just seemed like he was on the sidelines, kind of flapping his gums, always saying some stuff, trying to get in the mix. But it was like, why is he here? I get it. He's an attorney. And, here it makes sense. Him trying to, figure out where the titles are going to be or trying to get the titles back. But
And is he supposed to be a ripoff of Johnny Cochran?
Yes. So this is kind of around the time of the OJ lawsuit. And so I think he
wasn't a lawsuit. A lot more than that, Ryan.
All right. Fair enough.
Jesus.
And according to Cornette, Clarence Mason's name is a combination of Clarence Darrow and Perry Mason. So I guess two other well-known attorneys, and they kind of just combined to make his name. The dude is an actual attorney in real life, and his name is Herman Stevens Jr., and apparently he always wanted to be in the wrestling business growing up. After managing Cornette's stable, he gets involved with Crush, and as Tex said, the Nation of Domination. He actually eventually goes to WCW and manages Chris Kanyon, and he also manages the Harlem Heat 2000. And when he's in WCW, he goes under the moniker of Jay Biggs. I did think it was funny during Raw when he was all up in Gorilla Monsoon's face being like, did you or did you not say that, Mr. Monsoon? Like, kind of, you said that the referee's decision was final. Is that correct? No, Mr. Monsoon, is that correct? Like, I thought it was just really good when he was like grilling him with the questions and stuff. But yeah, I think his role kind of sort of fades and fizzles as time goes on. But I think the WWF did a better job of contextualizing the events of their pay-per-view for the Raw audience compared to WCW on the show that followed Fall Brawl. But I feel like once the fans knew what happened from In Your House, maybe they flipped the channel out of disinterest. That's at least what the ratings would kind of indicate. Maybe viewers were just sort of nonplussed by what had happened on In Your House and what was going on. So the first match we get on Raw is Marty Jannetty, who is returning from a hiatus, and he is facing Skip of the Body Donnas. I noticed that they had the hotline on the screen, and it said the phone number was no longer active. And I wrote, sorry, business, you can't call the number this time.
I saw that. I would have tried. I would have given it a go.
Yeah. What did you guys, overall, what do you guys think of the Body Donnas as a gimmick?
I don't really care for them. It's Zip and Skip, right? Skip and Zip.
Yep.
Well, so we don't have Zip yet. Yeah.
Okay, no Zip yet. But
yeah.
Sunny is awesome.
Yeah. She's probably one of my favorite females in wrestling history.
Well, so I was watching the Raw with a buddy, and he likes Sunny, so I did a little fast forward to a future bikini contest at the Slammies. So lots more to look forward to with Sunny.
Tex, what do you think of the Body Donna gimmick?
I thought it was just another WWF goofy gimmick where they kind of make you into an occupation. I thought Skip was really talented. Chris Candido, really talented, and just another guy that they gave a goofy gimmick to, kind of like Dean Douglas.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to the idea of them being fitness instructors and personal trainers who just kind of make fun of everybody for being out of shape and, call the fans fat. I mean, there's like something there in terms of like getting heat and being a decent heel gimmick and stuff. Skip would like do push-ups in the ring when he had the guy down and stuff like that. But yeah, it definitely wasn't a gimmick that had any like super big upward mobility. Like, you didn't really look at Skip and be like, oh, that guy's going to be, a main eventer or something. But yeah, when they brought in Tom Pritchard to be Zip and, they had the tag team, I think they won the tag belts at a certain point. I think it's funny that Skip might be most famous for his feud with Barry Horowitz, and that's probably like his most famous thing in a way. But yeah, Chris Candido's awesome. Unfortunately he passed away from an issue with like blood clots and, several years ago. But yeah, I definitely thought he was a great worker and was probably used better in other promotions than WWF.
Chris Candido, Sonny, were they an item?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When was Sonny introduced? Or when were the Body Donnas introduced?
Pretty recently. I think for a while they were just doing like vignettes and promos of them like working out in the gym and being heelish and all this stuff. And then, yeah, they premiered. And Candido and Sonny, they got their start in Smoky Mountain Wrestling with Jim Cornette. And see, I think since Cornette had been like brought in, to work with the WWE, like I think... that might have been how, they got brought in the first place. I think Sonny was not only, like, amazingly hot, but I think she was also, like, pretty talented in terms of, like, cutting promos and talking and, and she really ended up doing, like, a lot of different things. But, yeah, at this point, her and Candido were still, like, in a relationship, but unfortunately for Candido, that eventually broke up and... she moved on to other wrestlers, and apparently, from what I can tell, several of them. So,
oh, wow.
There's a shoot interview where Tammy Sitch goes through, like, all these guys that she was with. Yeah. And the guy who's interviewing her actually, like, he, like, brings up every single one that he had heard about as a rumor, and then she confirms it or denies it. It's pretty... it's a little sad. Yeah, it's a little sad. But, so anyway... we don't have a jobber match this week, and so I thought for Jobber Watch, I thought Tex could just kind of talk a little bit about Marty Jannetty. I don't want to label him as a jobber. That might be a little too harsh. But I think, like, it's kind of one of the... this is the closest thing we have to a jobber match on Raw. So, Tex, do you know much about, why... Marty had disappeared for a little while and, why he was back?
He was inconsistent. I know he had, was it substance issues? I don't know if it was alcoholism or other substances, but he was like in and out of trouble. He would get arrested now and then. I don't have all the specific details. I just know they couldn't rely on him for very long, especially after he and Shawn Michaels had broken up. Kind of gave him less purpose. He had less of a role as a singles wrestler. Still really talented, still capable of putting on a really good match. He has a working style that's very similar to Shawn Michaels, but he just wasn't consistent enough that they could rely on him. And it seemed like after a while, every time you saw Marty Jannetty, it was, oh, Marty Jannetty's back. It's like he's been gone for a while, but he's back now. It's like every time you saw him, it's like he's back now.
I was looking into things a little bit, and like the first time that he left, it was because there was this situation with this jobber named Chuck Austin, and Marty accidentally paralyzed the guy.
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah, so Marty has this move called the Rocker Dropper, which he actually uses in the match with Skip. And Chuck Austin told Marty before the match that he knew how to take it right. And I guess Chuck Austin even kind of lied about how much experience he had and all this stuff. And then when they were actually doing the match, he took the Rocker Dropper the wrong way and he broke his neck. And it was like a big lawsuit, Chuck Austin and his lawyers, they sued the WWF and all this stuff. And Marty was kind of written off at that point. And then I guess right after WrestleMania 10, the whole lawsuit and everything kind of resurfaced and the case was heard. And I'm wondering if the whole Chuck Austin thing had to do with why Marty was gone again. Marty's story is very sad, and but I think it probably has something to do with both his drug issues and this whole Chuck Austin case that was going on.
Have you seen the Chuck Austin video?
I'm not a big fan of watching the terribly botched moves. Like one time I watched Triple H give this jobber a pedigree, and it looked so nasty because the guy didn't know how to take it. And I'm like, I'm not watching any of these injury videos anymore. I was like, that just looks so horrific. Apparently it wasn't such a big deal because they let Marty do the move in this match, you know, so I don't know. And then Billy Gunn basically made the move the famouser years later. But anyway, so, you know, I have my own notes about the Marty Skip match itself, but, you know, what did you guys think of it overall? How about you, Business?
I hardly remember this match.
I
So
hardly remember this match.
And I watched it 2 nights ago. So 1 out of 5.
You know, to open Raw and for it to be Marty Jannetty versus Skip, Sunny was in the mix. She was doing her typical heel female manager stuff. She was, you know, kind of distracting Marty and everything. And then you had the spot where Marty came out and hugged her, and then
A non-consensual embrace.
yeah, absolutely. And then got her to slap Skip by accident, and then Marty goes nuts and starts playing to the crowd. I gave it 2.5 stars. I thought they worked at a really nice pace. Candido showed off his kind of diverse move set. You saw a gut wrench powerbomb in there. You know, he had a big clothesline on Marty where Marty did the whole inside out selling of it where he just kind of tilt-a-whirls in the air. I didn't think it was a bad match at all. I gave it 2.5, especially for what they were, for what it was.
What was the finish?
Well, Marty hit a rocker dropper, and then he also hit a fist drop from the top rope. And then, and then he won with that.
I put lane finish. That was my one note.
The Rockers, they used to kind of do that sort of tandem spot where Marty would hit the rocker dropper and then Shawn would hit the fist drop off the top right afterwards, and that was kind of how they put a lot of people away as a tag team. So, I mean, Marty could have just done the rocker dropper and won that way. I noticed that they mentioned Marty's tag team history with Shawn Michaels, but they did not mention Shawn's betrayal of him where he threw him through the barbershop window. How convenient for their biggest babyface at the moment. We also got a noticeable Marty chant from the crowd, so that was kind of nice. I thought Marty's attire looked pretty weird. He had like the weird black double singlet that didn't really match his tights. I thought that was just kind of a strange thing. I also noticed that like Skip loves to take off the straps of his singlet. And, like, he did it, like, right away. Like, usually when guys, like, throw down the straps, like, it's, like, towards the end of the match, like, when they're about to, like, do something big. Skip had one singlet strap off in, like, the first 30 seconds. And then a minute later, he had the other one off. I'm like, dude, why aren't you just wearing tights? Like, he took his singlet, like, half off throughout the match. I don't know. I just thought that was funny. I also laughed about how Dean Douglas was taking notes during this match. I was like, what the hell? Like, you're about to face Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental Championship, and you're wasting your damn time taking notes about this jobber match in the beginning of the event. I just thought that was really weird. Jerry the King Lawler had a very funny line about Marty Jannetty in this match, where he said, the only thing harder than his muscles are his arteries. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, are you trying to say, like, he smokes? Or are you trying to say, like, he eats fast food? Like, I mean, maybe he was just trying to make a subtle joke about Marty being really unhealthy or something. I thought it was interesting that they just let Marty do the rocker dropper. They're like, oh, yeah, you won't paralyze anybody else. Candido knows what he's doing. Like, instead of just, like, banning the move entirely, they're like, it's fine, you know. And then McMahon does some recap after the match about the triple header from In Your House and all of that. And then we get a short spot of Doc Hendricks trying to get fans to buy an In Your House 3 t-shirt for $20, not including shipping and handling. He has a lady fan who's modeling the shirt, and he calls her the lovely Tammy, although I would debate exactly how lovely she was. I think the real lovely Tammy is Tammy Sitch, Sonny. Why don't have her model the shirt? You know, Doc does say, Vinnie Mac, catch my jargon. We have an unbelievable bargain. And I don't know. I like Michael Hayes. I even the Doc Hendricks version of Michael Hayes, I just think he's awesome. After that, we get the WWF Tag Team Champion match between the Smoking Guns and Owen Hart and Yokozuna.
Are we skipping over the whole legal argument as to why they're still tag team champions? I think you need to take a step back.
Well, how about you try to explain it then?
I want to make sure I understand it. Okay, you tell me where I'm wrong, because I thought Clarence Mason did a pretty good job making his case. So Owen Hart was not there. So they have British Bulldog brought in as a substitute. For that match only, British Bulldog is a tag team champion. And because Owen Hart interfered and got pinned, he was not at that time the tag team champion. So his being pinned, you can't have 3 tag team champions. His being pinned didn't result in the transfer of the title. And I'm not even sure why it would count for the match if he technically wasn't in it.
Yeah, it is a little confusing why the ref would have counted that in the ring. When Diesel gave him the jackknife and pinned him, it's a little weird that the ref would be like, oh yeah, I'll just count this as if Owen's in the match. That seemed a little strange. Part of the fallout from that was that Monsoon said that, okay, Yoko and Owen have to defend against Shawn and Diesel again at a later date, and we're going to get the Smoking Guns versus Yoko and Owen on Raw. And so that's why we're getting this match, is because Gorilla Monsoon retaliated that way after Cornette and Clarence Mason attacked him with the legal issues. So that's why we're getting the Smoking Guns versus Owen and Yoko. They have Jim Cornette and Mr. Fuji in their corner. It's a WrestleMania 11 rematch from when Yoko and Owen beat the Guns for the belts in the first place. I have a decent amount of notes and stuff, but what did you guys think of this match overall?
There was a USA chant at one point. I enjoyed that. I think it was when Yoko was in the ring. And then I also enjoyed the finish. Otherwise, fine. Who came out? Was it 2 Dudes with Attitudes came out after the Smoking Guns won it?
Yeah, they came out, and it's not actually the last time they'll come out. But yeah, I think they were coming out to, congratulate the Smoking Guns, and think it was just kind of a way to get Shawn and Diesel on the show. What do you think, Tex?
Pretty good tag match. I wouldn't say I love the Smoking Guns, but they were a solid tag team, and they had some nice moves together, and they worked at a pretty quick pace. You definitely had a long nerve hold from Yoko on Billy Gunn, where he just had his hand on his on the base of his neck and was just kind of there for it seemed like 10 minutes, and they isolated Billy for most of the match. And I thought the finish was pretty hype. It's just it was kind of slow there for a while. I gave it 2.5 stars again, and then of course Shawn and Diesel come out to take their spotlight.
I did enjoy that Bart Gunn and Owen Hart had a crisscross spot in the ring where they were. I love that spot where the guys just keep running in a crisscross T formation off the ropes back and forth. It's such an old school spot, so I kind of enjoyed that. Jerry the King Lawler had a comment about Owen Hart where he said, if the WWF was a meat market, Owen would be a prime rib. And that has a lot of sad irony to it now, because Bret Hart has actually called the WWF a meat market in terms of how they treat their wrestlers. And then, we all know, sadly, about Owen's tragic death and everything. And so I just felt like that line was man, that line just was had sad irony to it. I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of whenever Yoko has to break up a 3 count. It's all so slow and lumbering, and the ref usually has to wait for him and stuff. We got a Sidewinder, which I love that move from the Smoking Guns. And the match eventually ends when Owen Hart gets hit by an errant splash from Yoko that was meant for someone else, and I was like, ouch, I would not have enjoyed being splashed by Yoko. And then Billy dropkicks Yoko out of the ring, and Bart pins Owen, and we have new tag team champions. I didn't like the Smoking Guns that much growing up, but watching them in retrospect, I do appreciate their work, and they are kind of fun to watch. I'm not super into the cowboy gimmick or anything, but so far, all of their matches that, I've watched while we've been doing these reviews, I've really enjoyed. I couldn't really decide if this was good booking or bad booking to put the belts on the Smoking Guns at this point. I guess it does open up Owen as a singles wrestler, which I think is a good idea. I would love to see him feud with Shawn Michaels, which I think they've been hinting at, but we might not end up getting that because of things that transpire. We get this brief little plug for Jean-Pierre Lafitte because he's going to face Bret Hart in a rematch at next week's Raw. And I gotta say, I really love the Jean-Pierre Lafitte wanted poster. I love how it said the crime, robbery, 3 counts. And I just love the 3 counts pun there. I thought that was really funny. Then we get Doc Hendricks interviewing Gorilla Monsoon. Monsoon announces that Diesel will defend the WWF title against the British Bulldog at the In Your House 4 next month. with the winner of that match facing Bret Hart at Survivor Series. We also are going to get Shawn Michaels defending the Intercontinental title against Dean Douglas at In Your House 4. We also are going to get the debut of Goldust in the ring. And we're going to get an Undertaker-Mabel match at In Your House 4. And Doc Hendricks actually calls that match a train wreck, which I thought was... I don't know if you want to use that word, Doc, but so lots of plugging of the next pay-per-view and even the following pay-per-view Survivor Series.
In beautiful Winnipeg.
Right. Yeah, I think he says the Great White North. Now we're already at our main event of Raw. We're getting The Undertaker with Paul Bearer versus the British Bulldog with Jim Cornette. I know that last week, Business sounded pretty excited about this match. He grew up a big Undertaker fan, so I wanted to just throw it to you right away and ask you what you thought of this Bulldog Taker match.
I was grateful that we finally got some Taker. The whole DQ finish, that I never really enjoy him that much, but the fact that they were able to get, Shawn Michaels and Diesel to come out there and they have the whole showdown, I enjoyed that piece of it. I thought it was funny when they had the handshaking. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, because it's funny to see Undertaker shake hands with people. I wrote that down. Yeah. I wrote that down too. I just wrote Taker giving out handshakes. LOL.
Yeah, I got a big kick out of that.
We haven't really done an Undertaker match yet, so this was my second favorite look for Taker overall, with the purple gloves and the purple on the boots there. Second only to the gray, the original gray. But I thought Cornette was making his presence felt in the match. Then of course you get a no finish. You get the DQ finish with King Mabel coming out, watching from the aisle and everything. I gave it 2.5. I thought it was good. British Bulldog's a solid worker too. I thought he struggled with his vertical suplex on the Undertaker, and I get it. Undertaker's a big guy, big tall guy, so it's probably awkward trying to hold him up there vertically. But yeah, solid match overall. I just wasn't. Again, we get more HBK and Diesel coming out at the end, and they're having a pose off or a dance off at the end of the show. They're just kind of forcing them into the show, even though they don't have a match.
Exactly. They come in for the smoking guns, and then they come in to help Taker, and then I think there's a commercial break. Then they come back. There's the whole ad on the WrestleMania special, which is it just that they're going to be showing WrestleMania that happened on cable or something? That's what I picked up. Then something with Bob Backlund, and then I feel like the last 5 minutes are just Shawn Michaels and Diesel, and Shawn's dancing in the ring, and they're just talking over it.
Yeah, so that WrestleMania special, it was going to be on a Saturday night at 10 Eastern or something. On Fox, and I think it was just going to be all the highlights from WrestleMania 11. They showed Pam Anderson and Jenny McCarthy. They showed Lawrence Taylor. I think it was just going to be kind of a recap type show where they kind of gave you the highlights and stuff. But I can't imagine that did very well in the ratings, considering when it was airing, and I doubt they were showing the whole pay-per-view. Yeah, I mean, this match was kind of crazy in terms of all the stuff that happened. I did like how Cornette broke up Taker's old school rope walk by shaking the ropes and having Taker fall down, and then Taker started choking Cornette on the outside, but then Bulldog gave him a chop block and threw him into the steps, and so Taker was selling the leg for the rest of the match. Yeah, Mabel and Mo come out and kind of stalk The Undertaker during the match. And, Mabel didn't even have his mohawk all, gelled up. His mohawk was all just, flat on his head. It looked, really sloppy. I was like, what's up with that? And then this is when Waylon Mercy was watching from the crowd. And it was just for, 5 seconds. And then, yeah, eventually, Mabel interferes, gives Taker a big belly-to-belly suplex, and then Bulldog hits the running power slam on him, and then Mabel hits a leg drop on him, and we not only get Diesel and Shawn running out to make the save, but then Yoko and Owen come out after that, and then the Smoking Guns come out after that.
Covered in soap.
Yeah, I loved how the Smoking Guns were covered in soap suds and had their denim jeans all soaked like they had run out straight from the shower. I actually thought that was kind of a funny touch. It was such a pressing issue for them to come make the save that they had to just run out of the shower right away and come out. But this was basically the definition of a schmaz in wrestling, like just a schmaz finish. All these guys coming out to brawl after a DQ. I'm surprised that Razor and Kid and Hitman and Jean-Pierre Lafitte didn't run out too. Like, they were literally trying to put like every person who's feuding into the ring at once. This whole segment dragged on forever. I don't know whether they just didn't time the show very well. I didn't like the ending of this match. I didn't like that they filled the ring with like 8 different bodies, and there was a Got Milk promo, and it was a lot better than last week's botched Got Milk promo from Vince, so that was nice for him. There's a quick recap of what happened with Razor Ramon and Dean Douglas, and what happened with 123 Kid coming to interfere, and that's to build up for the Razor Kid match we're going to get on next week's Raw, a heated rematch between them. Jerry Lawler even says that he's heard rumors that the Kid is negotiating with Ted DiBiase, so we'll have to see if Ted DiBiase plays a role in the match. And then we're also going to get a Bret Hart Jean-Pierre Lafitte rematch next week on Raw as well. So it's kind of like next week we're just going to get 2 matches we've already seen relatively recently, and those are like the big matches that they're plugging. Granted, Razor and Kid has some kind of new heat on it from what's happened, but just giving us another Bret Lafitte match, like, I'm not going to complain, I guess, but both the show and its build to the following show felt a little rehashed and kind of recycled to me, other than getting to see The Undertaker. Yeah, I mean, Raw was, I can kind of see why it didn't do so great in the ratings. We did get the title change where the Smoking Guns won the tag titles, but I kind of feel like if you had seen in your house, like, you might not have really felt like you needed to watch this that badly, other than the whole chaps with all the straps and seeing what would happen with them, and whether they would come out and have to defend the titles or whatever. But what are your guys' overall feelings on this Raw episode and what we're gonna get next week?
I enjoyed the Clarence Mason bits and seeing the Undertaker. The Undertaker made it for me, even though it was kind of a silly appearance. But seeing him, I still enjoyed it more than Nitro, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I like that we had a title change hands on this episode of Raw. But other than that, I thought most of the episode was pretty forgettable. But it's always nice to see Undertaker in action. So with the combination of the tag titles changing hands, and that was actually a decent match with a pretty fun finish. And then you do have an Undertaker match in there. Thought it wasn't the greatest Raw show ever. It wasn't the worst. But most of it was pretty forgettable overall.
Real quick, I just have to say, I feel like Undertaker, that gimmick is such a nice one to have from the perspective of they can just bring him out every so often, and he's a big draw. And if you are him, it's not like you have to worry about them being like, hey, like, now the Undertaker is going to call in from, Death Valley, like they have Bret Hart calling in. So he kind of gets to probably, a bit more time to himself than a lot of others who have gimmicks where they need to do a lot more promoting, and they also need to be out there just a bit more.
A lot of people would view that gimmick on the surface level at first as being terrible, but I think you're right that it does lend to, he literally can just resurrect. It's like part of his gimmick, and so you can have all these monsters who come and, defeat him, and, it's like literally that one casket match with Yokozuna where like all these heels came out to like beat up Taker and then throw him in the casket. He literally like rose out of the casket and like ascended into the heavens, like and you could just always keep bringing him back. I think you're right about that, and there's even a chance that he's gonna maybe be at this upcoming Saudi show in 2020. I mean, he was at the last Saudi show, one of the last Saudi shows, so yeah, he's still doing his thing, and he still can come back and get a big pop from people. WrestleMania is coming up. I heard we're gonna get AJ Styles and the Undertaker at the upcoming WrestleMania. That's pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, Taker's a legend, one of the greatest of all time. All right, so Nitro was from the Florence Civic Center in Florence, South Carolina. The 4th episode of Nitro that ever aired. Did a 2.7 in the TV ratings, so much better than Raw this week. We got Bischoff, Mongo, and Heenan on commentary as usual. Pepe is in a horse outfit. And Mongo says something along the lines of he needs to saddle up because he's in for a wild ride. Bobby calls Pepe a 4-pound tarantula, which got a pop from me. Bischoff was having none of it. And we started the show with Alex Wright and Disco Inferno. So I wanted to ask you guys what you thought of Disco's debut and the Disco Inferno gimmick in general.
I think it's a really shitty gimmick, but the guy who does it pretty well. I enjoy it. I think it's pretty funny. And during the match, like, sometimes I think of these matches in terms of WrestleMania 2000, all right, for Nintendo 64, where whoever's doing their taunts, is supposed to power up and be able to get their special. And so just by the sheer amount of taunting that Disco Inferno did during the match, I thought he should have won, like, based on the THQ logic of things. But I enjoyed it. I think Disco Inferno's like a funny gimmick. The crowd seems into him. It's like a stupid entrance with a disco ball. Like, there is something funny about that, and I give the guy credit for trying to pull it off.
I wasn't aware that Disco Inferno was around in 95, and so when you say that's his debut, or this episode was his debut, that makes a lot of sense. Lame gimmick, but he pulls it off. He makes the absolute best out of it. He was always entertaining to watch. He always gets a reaction from the crowd, for better or for worse. And eventually he starts using like the Stone Cold Stunner as his finishing move. He calls it the Chart Buster. I don't know. He didn't use it in this match. And I don't know when he started picking that move up. But yeah, Disco Inferno was cool. His entrance music's actually pretty good. The Disco Fever with the ladies chanting in the background, I thought it was kind of interesting.
I'm really happy you remembered the name of that finishing move, because I was going to ask you, like, what was his stunner called? Yeah, the Chart Buster. That's awesome. Yeah, and I agree. I love his theme music. Disco Fever.
Yeah.
Disco Fever. Yeah, it's awesome.
Disco fever, disco fever, disco fever, yeah, 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 yeah. Disco fever, disco fever, disco fever, yeah, 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 yeah. He's so cocky, he's so cool, he's just a disco dancing fool. When he steps out on the floor, the girls are screaming, we want more, more, more. Disco fever, disco fever, disco fever, yeah, 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 yeah.
I gotta say, he was in much better shape down the road. He actually looked kind of fat for his debut. And, he had his Shake Your Booty tights, or Shake Your Booty is written on the back of the tights. It's kind of the battle of the dancers, because, Alex Wright eventually kind of has his whole, like, I'm a German techno dancer or whatever, and so,
Yep.
and I think they eventually put these two guys together in a tag team called the Dancing Fools. Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think, the disco gimmick on the surface is pretty lame, but it does have a little bit of heat to it, like, I think fans could easily hate on Disco, but I think, making him a face and just kind of a funny comedy gimmick that fans would love, it has good flexibility in terms of being a heel or a face. And I gotta say, Alex Wright, I'm kind of a fan of his work in the ring. Like, he does a lot of, like, crazy high flying stuff. I like that he did that backflip off the top rope, like, during his entrance. He also had, like, a spinning heel kick and a springboard drop kick. He even drop kicked Disco off the top rope at one point. So I was just kind of liking their in-ring work together. And, I would say Disco has some room for improvement, just his debut and everything. But it was kind of funny to see a match end on a backslide like that. Like, I've seen other matches end on a backslide, but this was just kind of, like, out of nowhere. And it felt kind of, like, anticlimactic for, like, the rest of the match and sort of the high spots that were involved and stuff. But yeah, overall, I thought this was a pretty good opener. I don't know if it was better than Marty Jannetty and Skip, but it was kind of on the same level. Yeah, you guys have any other comments on, Alex Wright or the finish of the match or anything like that?
I like how Alex Wright gets a lot of elevation on his high fly moves, his drop kicks off the top rope, his spinning heel kick, everything he does, even his dive to the outside of the ring, his suicide dive. I mean, everything gets a ton of elevation on it. So he's really an athletic guy. He's more athletic than I remember.
So after that, we get a pretty funny backstage promo with Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart. And they're talking about Kevin Sullivan and the Giant and the Dungeon of Doom. Hulk Hogan was doing these like neck raises exercise. Jimmy Hart was holding the championship belt on Hogan's neck, and Hogan was doing like neck raises with it, even though he's like in a neck brace. I'm like, what kind of workout regimen is that? You know, and he's talking about how he hasn't missed a single workout, even though the Giant basically like snapped his neck. He still has been like working out like super hard. I also noticed that Hogan was wearing 2 crucifixes. And I was like, who needs 2 crucifixes? Yeah. I thought that was pretty funny. He calls the Giant the big stinky Giant. He says that he's gonna build a bigger, better monster truck, and he's going to come for the Giant, and it's building up to Halloween Havoc, where we find out that we're going to get like a monster truck showdown between them, and then we're also going to get a normal match later between them. What did you guys think of this Hogan-Jimmy Hart spot in the back?
Now, did they say Halloween Havoc is going to be in Detroit?
Yes.
I think they did.
They did.
And is that where Hogan first faced off against the Giant's father, Andre the Giant?
They referenced that.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought they said something about like, I'm gonna, beat you right next to where I beat your father, or where he is buried or something.
He said he was gonna lay the Giant to rest next to his father in Detroit.
Exactly.
Or something. You might be. I think so. I think WrestleMania 3 was in Detroit.
Yeah, I did notice that it was another Andre reference there. And actually, later in the show, Bobby Heenan just brings up Andre by name. I never mind seeing a Hulk Hogan promo. Like, they always crack me up. They're always good. They're always good. Like, he really did deliver excellent promos, and this was no exception.
Hey, real quick, I looked it up. WrestleMania 3 was in Pontiac, Michigan, which I think is a little bit north of Detroit.
The Pontiac Superdome, I think.
Well, and, Detroit is obviously a big place for, cars and the automobile industry and everything. And so I think, like, the monster truck thing, maybe they were also building on that. Detroit is a place where, because they do talk about how Hogan's monster truck is going to be built by the same people who built the Bigfoot monster truck, which I guess was some famous monster truck from this era. We get a Slim Jim commercial real quick after this with Macho Man. And then Gene Okerlund is in the ring, and he sets up the clip from last week where Savage slapped Luger in the face. And then, back live on Nitro, we get this kind of face-off from Lex Luger and Randy Savage in the ring. Luger says that he wants Savage's respect. A match is made for next week, and Lex Luger says that if he loses, he'll leave WCW and he'll give Savage his WCW World title shot. Noticeably, Luger does not shake his hand when they make the deal. Macho goes to try to shake his hand, and Luger just kind of gives him this weird, like, pat on the shoulders or whatever. He, like, almost pushes him away or something. And I kind of wrote down, like, I wonder if that no handshake spot will kind of matter in the future, like, if Savage does win. But it does kind of seem unlikely that Luger would lose. I don't feel like he's going to leave the WCW and give up his title shot after kind of just premiering a few weeks earlier. So, I don't love Lex Luger's in-ring work, but, I mean, I am excited to see him and Savage go off next week.
I'm looking forward to next week. I'm hoping Macho Man drives Lex Luger out of the WCW, although I know it's not going to happen. I enjoyed this, the gimmick for this upcoming match. Keeps me hopeful.
Anyone else notice who said that they were thumbs down on Luger from day one?
I had that written down. Yeah, I saw that. Or didn't Luger say you're thumbs down on me?
That's what it was. Okay. Yeah, you've been thumbs down on me from day one. And I think that made me laugh out loud because I was like, yeah, me too. But yeah, I'm excited for next week as well. Anything Macho Man related. And, he'll get a good match out of Luger, I anticipate.
Macho Man's pomp and circumstance that they do in WCW. I love it.
I wrote that down too, man. Like I wrote like this was the first time that I had noticed the difference between his WCW Pomp and Circumstance version and his WWE one. And the only real difference is that they have Macho going like, "Ooh yeah," in like the beginning of it, and then there's kind of like this twangy guitar, like,
Yeah.
and then it goes into Pomp and Circumstance. We get an advertisement for Halloween Havoc. Bischoff's like, machine versus machine, you know, the biggest monster truck ever built. Then we get a Kurosawa versus Sergeant Craig Pittman match. We got Colonel Robert Parker in Kurosawa's corner. I definitely have some notes for this match, but why don't you guys give me your thoughts on Kurosawa versus Pittman?
I like the Kurosawa character. I like the fact that they're like he has a reputation in Japan for hurting people. And then I like the fact that he's going up against a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, setting up this kind of World War II, redux between Japan and the USA. The Sergeant Craig Pittman, okay. I think I tried to count the number of times he did a headbutt to the midsection. And I just did not get a lot out of that move. It looks kind of silly. And then they do the back slam onto the concrete. And I think Mongo says that splatted like grandma out of her wheelchair.
That is correct.
I don't even remember how it finished. I just remember it was a weak finish.
Yeah, it was a German suplex pin for a victory, but it wasn't the cleanest German suplex ever because Pittman's not like the smallest guy, and it's not an easy move to really pull off if the guy isn't like tiny. But I like Kurosawa's work. I liked his buzzsaw kicks; those are pretty nice. They look pretty stiff. The backdrop on the concrete, like you mentioned, was pretty stiff looking. And yeah, those flying headbutts, those diving headbutts from Craig Pittman. I wrote down like Honda flying headbutts from Street Fighter. I'm just like, I don't know why we had to get so many of those. I didn't think they really paid too many dividends for them. But I gave it like 1.5 stars overall.
All right, well, I loved this match. I thought this was the sleeper for both shows. I think honestly, I'm going to say this was my favorite match from both shows. There are obviously some things that I thought were strange about it. I really don't understand why the hell Colonel Parker is Kurosawa's manager. That doesn't make any damn sense. Like Business said, I did love how they were talking about how Kurosawa had broken Hawk's arm from the Road Warriors. And,
That's right.
It's like, everybody that they bring in from Japan, well, maybe not everybody, but that when Norton came in from Japan, they talked about how he had a reputation for like breaking people's bones. And so everybody from Japan just has a reputation of hurting people, I guess. Okay, so obviously, in like a real fight, no one would do those flying headbutts to someone's midsection, but I actually love it as a spot in the ring just because it's kind of unique and funny and weird. It kind of reminded me of what Junkyard Dog used to do to people in the ring, where he'd get on all fours and then like headbutt them and all that stuff. I noticed that Bischoff was marking out as he was calling all the karate kicks. He was doing his whole, back leg round kick and all that stuff where he loves like calling the karate spots in the ring. I loved the bump on the concrete. The referee apparently didn't care about the over-the-top rule in WCW because you're not technically supposed to be able to throw someone over the top rope in WCW at this point. It's against the rules. But they even made a mention of that where, I guess the ref thought that was inadvertent or whatever. Pittman goes for his Code Red finisher, which is just kind of like an arm bar. But Kurosawa escapes, and Kurosawa gets the win with a German suplex. I love how Heenan was telling Bischoff to to quiet down when Kurosawa was in the ring. He was like, shh, shh, the man is meditating. The man is meditating. I really like that part. I thought this match was awesome. It was stiff. It was hard hitting. It wasn't very long, but the guys like really gave it their all, and I thought this was great. I think I would give this like 2.5 or 3 stars. I really enjoyed it. Then we get another Gene Okerlund interview in the ring, this time with Arn Anderson and Brian Pillman. They were just kind of making fun of Ric Flair for like not having any friends and having like burned all of his bridges with other people and stuff like that. I really loved hearing Pillman's like raspy ass voice while he was like cutting his promo on Flair. He called Flair gutter slime, who has to panhandle to get by in the world. I don't know what the hell Pillman was wearing, like an all denim outfit with a fanny pack.
That was awesome.
It was amazing. It definitely did a good job of building up the Arn Anderson Flair feud and everything. And
they talked about a tag team situation. And is it Ric Flair is going to need a partner to face off against those two? And it would be Savage or Sting or something?
Well, that's what Arn was saying, is that Flair can no longer really turn to Sting or Savage because, you know, I think Arn said, like, he's like, oh, you know, you punched a 70-year-old man, which I think probably was Macho's father, which was like Angelo Poffo. And so he had burned a bridge with Savage, and then Arn brought up the fact that Flair had basically almost crippled Sting in a match from like the previous year or something. And like, you know, so I think the whole idea was like, you don't have any friends you can turn to because, you know, you've burned all your bridges. And so now, you know, me and Pillman are a twosome, and now, you know, basically if you come at one of us, you're going to have to come at both of us, and we have the advantage. And so I think you're right that it is building up probably to some kind of tag match where Flair will find a partner. I don't know. What do you think, Tex?
I enjoyed the promo a hell of a lot. Pillman on the mic is kind of, because, you know, I remember as a kid seeing him in WWF, I was wondering what the big deal was. I was wondering why he was in the Hart Foundation, and I didn't really get it. And so seeing promos like this and seeing his in-ring work in WCW, I see the potential. I get it. His WWF stint makes a whole lot more sense now. And Arn Anderson's work on the mic, you can tell he's just a veteran, and that's just a veteran promo. And it was just right to the point. Everything with Arn, you know, it was nothing special, nothing that really jumped out at you, but the delivery was good. He alluded to his tag team prowess and everything like that. So I enjoy the promo a lot.
So we get a WCW Saturday Night advertisement. We're going to get the debut of Dusty Rhodes as the Color Man. Sting's going to face Johnny B. Bad for the U.S. Championship. The American males will be in action defending their tag titles, and we're going to get the Giants' response to Hogan's challenge. I might have to start trying to watch those WCW Saturday Night shows. I got to check one out, especially if Dusty's going to be commentating. So then we get Randy Savage versus Kevin Sullivan, which is building off of the heat from last week where Sullivan attacked Macho Man on the beach when Randy Savage was just trying to get a workout in the middle of the beach, and Sullivan jumped him and choked him with the bench bar and beat him up and all of that. So we got Zodiac at ringside. And
what is the Zodiac gimmick?
Good question, man. I mean, it's definitely the part of the Dungeon of Doom that kind of makes like the least sense, because it's like not like the rest of it makes a ton of sense or anything, but it's like, you know, okay, the Taskmaster, fine, you know, the Giant, cool, you know, the Shark, okay, whatever, Kamala, okay, but then there's like this Zodiac guy, and he did this weird promo which actually has become kind of a joke amongst wrestling fans, where there's this promo where the Zodiac just keeps going, yes, no, yes, no. You have no idea what it's supposed to mean. Is he crazy? Are those the only 2 words that he says? Why is he called the Zodiac? Why is he dressed like a zebra?
Yes, no, no, yes, yes, no, yes, no.
Yeah, Brutus the Barber Beefcake had a million different gimmicks, and it's sad to say that the Barber is probably the best one. But he's definitely a guy who got over just because he was Hulk Hogan's friend. But I was kind of excited about seeing Savage and the Taskmaster, but I'll let you guys tell me what you think of the match first.
All I remember is same kind of finish as Raw, in which you end up with a DQ and a bunch of people end up coming out to try and help the situation. The Taskmaster did not strike me as like the savviest in-ring worker.
No, it was kind of hard for me to get excited about Taskmaster in the ring. I really had, notes mainly on Savage's babyface comeback, and then he eventually kind of lost his cool. As you'll see in a number of Savage matches, he has a tendency to kind of lose his mind every now and then, where he tosses the ref and gets himself DQ'd. I liked how he stacked up Taskmaster and Zodiac for that big elbow, and then Taskmaster moves and then he hits the Zodiac. I thought that was funny. Overall, I gave it a star. Just because of the finish. I mean, we had another kind of non-finish, kind of a schmaz. I thought it was pretty forgettable. Taskmaster didn't really bring much to the match as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, Kevin Sullivan sounds like he was a really good wrestling mind and a good booker, but yeah, in terms of an in-ring worker, he didn't really have a good look. He was kind of short. He was a little dumpy. He had this Boston accent that kind of made anything he did as Taskmaster sound kind of funny. Zodiac gets some cheap shots in so that Taskmaster can get the heat on Savage, but as Tex said, Savage makes his comeback. I did like during the match that apparently Pepe had either pissed or taken a shit on Heenan's shoes, because Heenan says something about what's on my shoes, and Mongo's like, Pepe, you working now. Savage throws the ref to the side and gets DQ'd out of his frustration. Then the Giant comes out, and I love how Mongo suggested using green beans to subdue the Giant.
I noticed that too.
I laughed.
Somebody go get a can of green beans to distract this guy.
I laughed super hard about that, because it was I kind of get it, the company that makes the green beans, the Green Giant or whatever, but it was just come on, man, that's such a stretch. And then the Giant just gives choke slams on everybody. He choke slams Savage. Then these two jobbers come out to try to help him, and I found out that it was Frankie Lancaster and Mark Starr, whoever the hell they are, and so that was really funny that these two random dudes showed up to try to help Savage, and Giant just chokeslammed them both. And then Alex Wright even comes out and, gets slammed for his, trouble. And then Luger also comes out and kind of stands over Savage and all this stuff, but then the Giant also just chokeslams him. So
that was awesome.
It was kind of awesome. I mean, they made the Giant look great. I got to say, they've done an awesome job giving the Giant a push. And he's one of the people I'm, most interested in WCW at the moment. They're definitely doing a great job of just making him look dominant and indestructible and everything like that. But it was another schmaz finish that really rivaled the one that we saw from Raw. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine in terms of building into something with the Giant coming out and everything like that. But yeah, the match itself wasn't too hot. We get a Halloween Havoc ad where they're the man becomes the monster, then the monster becomes the man, and they're just plugging the Giant Hogan match and everything like that. I thought it was funny that at the bottom of the Halloween Havoc ad it said card is subject to change. I was that's never a good sign.
Saw that.
Yeah, that's never a good sign. I gotta say, I am kind of looking forward to the monster truck thing based on everything I've heard about it in the past. Alright, so then we move into our main event for Nitro, which is Lex Luger and Meng. The match starts with Luger already beat up and, trying to recover in the ring after the Giant chokeslammed him and everything. So, Meng just runs out and, jumps him right away to take advantage of it. This is where Bobby Heenan explicitly mentions Andre by name, and he says that, I managed Andre the Giant and, I worked with him for years. And then he compares him to Paul White as the new Giant and says that, he's never seen anything like this before and all this stuff. And I was kind of wondering, I guess either Bobby screwed up and shouldn't have said his name, or I guess the WWF maybe just didn't own the rights to Andre's name, which I guess could also be the case. But this was the first time that they brought him up by name as opposed to just alluding to him, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of excited about Luger and Meng last week, kind of on a awesomely bad sort of level, but yeah, I mean, what did you guys think of this Nitro main event?
I enjoyed the fact that Luger was chokeslammed and then Meng just ran out. And I actually would have enjoyed it more if Meng just manhandled him the entire time. At the same time, though, I liked how it ended with the spike to the throat. I enjoyed that finish.
Yeah, the match turned out a little better than I thought, because I figured they were just going to go ahead and just have Meng dominate and make it anticlimactic because Luger got chokeslammed prior to the match. But it was actually pretty decent. I noticed Meng a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker in there, and then you had a really long rest hold. You have plenty of Luger shouts throughout the match. I gave it a star and a half. It wasn't anything terribly memorable with it. I did enjoy the finish, though. I did like the spike to the throat finish. A little foreign object finish. I liked it.
Yeah, I noticed the botch backbreaker from Meng that looked kind of painful for Luger. Meng hit a pile driver that looked awesome. Like it sort of looked painful but very awesome at the same time, and I think that's what you're trying to get with the pile driver. It's probably the best move of the match. We did get a lot of Luger yelling. This time it was more when he was on the offense. At one point, Mongo says that the Giant could be in the NFL, but then Bobby says he doesn't want a pay cut, which I thought was a good line. Ming pulls out this spike. Tex alluded to calling it a foreign object. I found out a fun fact that the WCW at one point called them international objects, so that they could be less offensive. Which I read that in the Death of WCW
Wow.
book. Yeah, I read that in this book, and I thought that was really funny. Ming is a pretty cool wrestler. I mean, he was Haku at one point. He's kind of known backstage as being like a legitimate tough guy that you don't want to mess with. And he pulls out this spike, he hits Luger with it, and he wins the match. They made Savage and Luger both look pretty weak before their match that we're going to get next week. Like, both of them were kind of either losers. Well, they both lost their matches, and then they both kind of got laid out and sort of, and I wasn't sure exactly, like, maybe that was just so that you wouldn't really feel like one was going in with the momentum, but to kind of have both of those guys lose right before they're going to kind of be your main event next week was a little weird. Mongo had some great lines tonight, but I think this one at the end was my favorite because I just really didn't understand what it meant, and maybe I'm just missing something, but Mongo said, "Something is rotten in Denmark." And it smells worse than what Pepe did to your shoes or whatever. Like, but do you guys have any idea what he would have meant by something is rotten in Denmark?
I think he was just like, I'm going to make a Hamlet reference and tie it into Pepe peeing on Bobby's shoes. I don't know what the treachery is necessarily, but I actually kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it too. I didn't even think about it being a reference to Hamlet, but I guess that does kind of make sense. And then we do get this quick clip of Bobby Heenan like cleaning off his shoes at the end, which I thought was kind of nice. Heenan's always great with those like really small touches, like he makes it feel real at all times. But yeah, I mean, kind of an okay Nitro from the level of like promoting Halloween Havoc and kind of building the Giant Hogan feud. And, I personally did love the Kurosawa Pittman match. I don't know why I loved it so much, but it was definitely one of my favorite parts of watching these two shows. Nitro did win in the ratings, but when I was done watching both these shows, I was literally kind of just thinking like, man, usually it would be a matter of like which show was better, but for me it was kind of like which show was worse this time. I guess Raw was better, but I mean, not by a lot. Nitro had my favorite match, but I guess like overall Raw was probably a better put together card. I don't know. We did have a title change on Raw and stuff, but I guess this was just, in my opinion, the worst two shows combined for a week that we've had yet. Yeah, I don't know what you guys thought about whether like one was much better than the other, or if you agreed with the ratings, or if you thought Raw was better.
I gave the win this week to Raw, but really that's because of the Undertaker. Like, I was just happy to be able to see him, because I feel like for a lot of the other wrestlers, you see them a lot more frequently, and I think they're a bit more they can serve the Undertaker a bit more, so I was happy to see him on Raw.
I had Raw slightly better, but like you said, it's not much. I mean, they weren't much better. But what really tipped the scales in their favor was having Taker on the card, and then having that title change, the tag titles change on Raw. I thought that was pretty solid. As far as Nitro, I didn't find too much that was memorable about Nitro. I thought actually the highlights of Nitro were the promos. I thought the promos were better than any of the matches. So
yeah, from like a promotional level, Nitro did an okay job. But yeah, I guess from the card, I preferred Raw. But yeah, both just had they had schmaz kind of finishes, and they both kind of felt like they sort of dragged at times. There were a lot of kind of like inexplicable lines on commentary from both commentary teams, and it just wasn't the tightest production for either show. On next week's Raw, we're gonna get a Razor Ramon 1-2-3 Kid rematch. We're gonna get a Bret Hart Jean-Pierre Lafitte rematch. Those are gonna be the two big matches on Raw. Next week on Nitro, we are gonna get Savage and Luger. We're gonna get some kind of Dean Malenko match, so that's cool. We're going to get the American Males versus the Nasty Boys for the tag titles, and they announced that Hulk Hogan will be there in Denver next week for Nitro, so we'll get some Hulk in action, or at least in the ring doing a promo. That'll be, episode 5 that we'll do next time, and I guess so far, Raw has maybe achieved 1 victory over Nitro, maybe 2. This might be the week that it most stood out as winning. Although it was kind of a lesser of 2 evils in this case, since both shows were kind of lackluster. We'll be building up to the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view with WCW, and we are going to do a review of that show for you all, so you can look forward to that in the future. Any final thoughts today, guys?
Just hoping next week's a little bit more robust.
Yeah, hoping for a better card next week on both shows.
All right, well, for Big Techs and Big Business, this is Frank Incensed, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.